Our first speaker is going to be Paul. And Paul, will you do a quick introduction just so people know who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, Paul Bass. I'm the president of First United Shawnee. I've been with First United 33 years. I've been in Shawnee 20 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. And we're going to go ahead and Christy, will you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm Chrissy Winningham. I office in Denton South as a Treasury Management Officer, and I also cover Denton, Crum, and Sanger.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy. And last but not least is Holly. Holly, will you introduce yourself and tell them where you're at?
Yes, I am Holly Rogers, and I'm actually in the Sherman Customer Care, the call center in Sherman, Texas. And I've been here for 2 years in June.
Awesome. That's wonderful. All right. So we're going to begin our Pillar Talk today, hearing from Paul as he shares with us how to develop our saving habit. Because, hey, let's admit it, we could all possibly. Now, I don't think Paul could be a better saver, because this is why I asked him to talk about this, is because he is a natural saver. I'm a natural spender, Paul's a natural saver, but Paul, let's talk about developing a saving habit.
Sure. So the way this came up was Jennifer was at the grand opening for the bank, and my parents were here. So she started talking to my mom about all kinds of things, but my mom, loves to tell stories. So she told her a story about Paul and his lunch money. And Paul didn't receive an allowance, didn't have any jobs to do, but Paul wanted money. So Paul, when he would go to school, he had money for lunch. So, and rather than buying lunch, I would opt for something out of the candy machine, the vending machine, maybe for 10 cents. And the difference, I saved. So, that is, and so what age was that? Probably 12. So from that, I got to thinking, well, in order for people to save, and starting with even young people like I was, you have to have some money. And so the point I want to make is, give the people in your lives that you're mentoring, children mainly, give them a chance to have some money, to earn some money. And so some concepts to consider there are, you can establish an allowance for chores, you could pay for grades, you can find odd jobs for them to do, but help them understand the value of earning money. So like a lot of times people say, well, here's your allowance, and if you make good grades, then we won't deduct from that. You'll get to keep all that. Today's a little bit of an incentive-based society, so the carrot motivation, meaning, hey, you do these good things and you can be rewarded for that, is probably more positive. There are lots of apps that, I discovered there are probably 6 or 7 apps for saving as you're engaging with children. There's one called, and I'm not advocating for any of these particularly, but there are several apps, one called Go Henry, one called Copper, another one called Greenlight. But the main point is, for savings, you have to understand the value of money and what it takes to, receive money, and then what to do with it, some sort of means of budgetary understanding. So another story that kind of tells about me being a natural saver was, and it's also, Jennifer may have heard this story too from my mom, but so with my first job, I actually was receiving compensation for doing work. And I didn't have a bank account. I didn't really know what to do with my checks. I knew they were, that was the money that I had, but I just stuck them in a tennis ball can. And so she's in my room, she's looking in this tennis ball can, and there's, like 8 or 10 checks uncashed. And so that's when she's like, we need to get you a bank account. So I began with a bank account, saving money, and I understand today, probably my favorite word, and the last thing I'll interject here is the word discipline. My kids say that that's my favorite word because really saving is just a matter of discipline. And so there's so many options for things for people to spend money on, kids included. And I jokingly say, in my day, we didn't have a lot of things to spend money on. I mean, we played with sticks and rocks in the yard, so there was not a lot of options to spend your money on. But I think start early, understand the value of money, and then you're going to have to apply some discipline for it to work over time. But that's kind of what saving is for me and what it's meant to me, and how, yes, I would classify myself a natural saver.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things that kind of came up for me as you were talking about that, Paul, is I used to do a class, and it had like 3 things on it for kids, and one place was a place to save, one was a place to spend, and one was a place to give. So it had like 3 components to it. So it was really neat. So if a kid made like $1, then they could put some of it to spending, some to saving, and some to giving. And they got to kind of make that up. But it was really starting to reinforce the habit at a really young age. And then another thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about, saving those checks and, really just trying to always save money. And I know you were like saving it all. But I think
Mostly, yes.
I think that one of the best things that I have found is like start somewhere, a really small step. So let's say that you work and you do earn money, would be just to set like maybe $10 or $20 aside if you've never saved before, and have it like automatically put into your account so that way you can start the saving. And the last thing I wanted to really say about the stuff you talked about, that my granddaughter and my grandson, whenever they were born, one of the things I've done is I've opened them a savings account. And so they don't know it, but I'm saving for them. So I actually have accounts here at the bank, and every time I get paid, I put money in each of their accounts. And my granddaughter, she's almost got $3,000, but if you talk to her, she'll tell you she's saved like $40.
Yes.
She has no idea how much she's really saved. But if you don't really have it, always talk to those grandparents, because we really love our grandchildren, and so we're probably very willing to start some kind of saving for our grandkids to help them to start at an early age. So those are great tips, Paul. Thank you for sharing that. We're now going to hear from our next speaker, which is Chrissy. But before I have Chrissy start talking, one of the things that I really wanted to share with y'all is that in January at First United, we had the opportunity to offer our employees to attend Financial Peace University. And we had 98 of our employees from both states, Oklahoma and Texas, decide that they wanted to participate. And so we had, like I said, 98 employees, and Chrissy was one of the people who actually signed up. And I just learned this week, like she started with us, y'all, in January, and we started like mid-January. And so she started just in time and was able to participate in the Financial Peace class. So we're going to hear from Chrissy as she tells you what she really kind of got from attending that Financial Peace University class.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yeah, so I did start with First United in January, but I've been in banking for 22 years. And when you think about that, you think you understand what budgeting is. You've been in the financial world. But what I realized was I was really good at writing things down or following my banking app, So that isn't really budgeting. And when I went through Financial Peace University, I realized that there was definitely some things that I could do better. As a single person, that tracking worked out great. But once I got married and we had a spender and a saver, that tends to be the way it works, right? Get together, it was a little more challenging. But one of the biggest takeaways I got from Financial Peace University was that zero balance budget. It was to give every dollar a job. And that was very helpful because it was also eye-opening when you realize, like, here's the categories I have, but then you're actually tracking those expenses in those categories to see where you might go off course a little bit. For example, Starbucks, a morning run can cost you $10 if you're getting the right coffee, but you have to account for that. I also realized the places where we were spending too much money, like maybe Amazon. Anybody else have a problem with Amazon?
Guilty.
I actually took my credit card off the website just to kind of help control that spending, because I didn't realize until I was writing things down how much I was really spending on extra things. And when gas prices soared, I knew, like, okay, my budget changed on that. So I was going to have to borrow from other categories to make sure that worked. So the big first thing I did was a zero balance budget to make sure I was tracking all of my spending and giving every dollar a job.
And that's every dollar of your income, right? So
every
if
dollar.
You and your husband, you just combined it and y'all gave it a job. So
yeah,
awesome.
Savings dollars, investment dollars, spending dollars, every dollar a job. And it was really, like I said, eye-opening. But the next thing is when we started tracking these expenses, if we weren't communicating, we didn't know what we were doing. So we started having these, we tried to do them weekly. It got a little hard, but at least once a month we were having our business meeting. And the nerd in me, I think Dave Ramsey calls us nerds when we get excited about Excel spreadsheets. The nerd in me would print out my Excel spreadsheet, talk about all the tracking I did. I would look at what Dwayne was spending, and we would have a meeting and go over everything. And when you're looking at it that way, when you go to Starbucks and you're like, $10 for coffee and a breakfast, is it worth it? Can that purchase wait? And that was a conversation we started having. And it wasn't so much that we were, saying no to expenses. We were actually having a conversation about it. Like, that doesn't make sense right now. Can we do that next month? Let's adjust for that. Let's create a budget for that. And so that was really helpful. And these meetings just opened up that conversation, and communication is really important. The biggest advice I can give you in that part of tracking your expenses is be okay with being real. Looking at those, writing it down, knowing what you're spending, and having that conversation is vulnerable to say, yeah, I splurged this week, or I splurged on this paycheck, and we're going to have to make adjustments. You're seeing the accountability of spending your money. And don't be afraid to see where your money is going, because when you really start looking at it, that's when you can make changes. There's a quote out there that says, what you pay attention to multiplies. And so when you're paying attention to where every dollar is going, that opportunity to grow your money for the better, to make those changes for the better, instead of just going, white flag, I'm done. What's a budget anyway? You can really focus on where your money's going, and it can grow. It can grow. And who doesn't want their money to grow?
No doubt. That's always a great feeling. So what I'm hearing you say that you really did that really made an impact on you, Chrissy, and your husband, Dwayne, was you gave every dollar a purpose by doing a zero-based budget. And then you really started tracking those expenses and just meeting and having those budget committee meetings is what Dave Ramsey likes to call them. And then you just looked and you made adjustments so that you could make sure you were spending your money on the things that mattered to y'all. Is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am. Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
I commend y'all for doing that. It's not an easy thing to do, and nobody loves the idea of budgeting. I just don't feel like I have, other than me and maybe you. But no, it's not a fun thing to do necessarily, but let me tell you, it really is the foundation for having a strong financial house in order. So that's how you keep it in order right there. All right,
Yes.
well, we're going to now, y'all, hear from Holly Rogers, and she also was one of our Financial Peace University participants this year, and she did some wonderful things, and we're just going to hear her share with you some habits that she started in January as well and has made some great progress. So, Holly, tell us about your your baby steps that you began implementing.
Yes. So this is actually the second time I got to take this course. The first time I took it a couple of years ago through my church. Unfortunately, in the middle of it, my dad passed away, so we had other priorities at that time other than budgeting and finances. So last year I got divorced, and so I went from having 2 incomes to having 1, but the same amount of bills. So when this showed up in January, I was like, I took this before, I didn't get to finish it, and now that I'm single again and I'm having to pay for all of these bills, I need some type of budgeting, I need some type of help. So I started taking this course. So baby step number 1 is what Dave Ramsey was call it. It's save $1,000 emergency fund. This is just for your emergency. Just if your car breaks down or if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, that's what you pull from. Then you save more later on after you're out of debt, which I had $21,000 in debt after the divorce. So I definitely needed to try to save. But if you're trying to save $1,000 and you can barely make it from paycheck to paycheck, that's hard to do. So some of the tips that Dave Ramsey had helped us with is sell things you don't need. I had an apartment full of stuff I didn't want anymore, so I started selling things out of my apartment. I got a second job, so I worked my normal shift at the bank, and then I went to a retail job in the afternoon. I worked 10 to 12-hour days, 6 days and 6 to 7 days a week, and I saved my emergency fund. And then after you save your emergency fund, what's the next step? I'm still drowning in debt. So the next step would be the snowball effect, the debit snowball method. So you pay all your bills the same minimum balance you normally pay. But you take your smallest bill that you owe and you pay extra to it to pay it off. So when that's paid off, you move those funds to the next one and then the next one until you paid off all but your mortgage. So I'm still working on my debt snowball method. I still have some in debt, but I was able to pay off through this emergency fund starter and through the debt snowball. I saved $1,000 in savings, and I've already paid off my 2 credit cards, and that's roughly around $2,000 since I started this in January.
Good job. Way to go. So one of the things I was going to mention is a lot of people may wonder, like, why only save $1,000? But this is how in the financial peace class that Dave Ramsey encourages you to quit borrowing money. So if you have $1,000 saved and something happens, you don't have to go put it on a credit card. So that $1,000 is truly just the starter emergency fund. Then when you do the debt snowball and you pay off your smallest balance first, and you're making only the minimum payments to all your other debts, then the cool thing is you start building momentum and you become debt-free over time. And that's exactly what Holly's been working on. And hey, you've heard her even talk about, like, she took on a second job for a while to bring in some extra income, and she's even had some sacrifices that she's had to really do because she took on all the debt after her unfortunate end to her marriage. And basically, she's working the plan, and it's starting to show and pay off. And I just want to encourage anyone who might be in a similar situation to try something. I mean, try something that you haven't done. And I always tell people whenever they're working like 2 jobs or they're having to give up some things, because one of the things I know Holly also did was she looked at her budget and she gave up, what was it that you gave up, Holly?
I gave up live TV. So I went to all the basic plans for phone, electricity, internet, like all the basic plans, the cheapest options. I'm never home much anyways, but I do kind of miss my live TV, but it was a sacrifice I needed to make.
And so she did, but it's not forever. It's just temporary until she gets things turned around. So I just love your story, Holly, and find it very motivational that you did it, and it's all because of you and the work that you're doing. So keep up the good work. Okay, so we're now going to move on, and I'm going to quickly summarize some things that hopefully will help you to elevate your personal financial well-being. And the first one is to pick a habit and make it as something that is truly achievable. So when you're thinking of a habit, don't go grand and big. Start with like a baby step. Like, could it be maybe you're going to save up to $1,000, and maybe it's going to take you a while. But look at things in your house that you could sell, or try to maybe take on a little side hustle like Holly did. Work overtime if that's an option for you. Also, make whatever your habit is become a priority to yourself, because we're all given the same 24 hours in a day. So you have to decide what during your 24 hours do you want to accomplish. So just make it a priority. Schedule it. Do what you have to. As Chrissy did, they had a weekly budget committee meeting, her business meeting, and she made it a priority that they really went and they looked at things so that they could really get comfortable with it. Because I'm going to tell y'all, it can take about 3 months before your budget starts to feel right. and then you're going to continue to adjust it. And you may forget things, and that's why you have to continue to adjust it. And then here's a really great one. Visualize your success. Think about that end result that you really want to achieve and just visualize it. Really see yourself meeting that goal. I can just see right now Holly becoming debt-free. I visualize it. It's going to happen. And guess what? When you do these 3 simple things, you'll have a changed life for the better. All right, so here's the next thing we're going to ask you to do is participate in a survey. This is a very quick, simple survey, and here's the thing. If you participate in this survey, you have an opportunity to win 2 Amazon gift cards. We're doing a random drawing. 2 people are going to win, so you can actually hold your phone. I'm holding my phone. You can use your camera, and there's a QR code. Or, Allison Grace, can you drop the Bitly? Oh, you did it already. You can click on the link. Maybe you're on your phone right now, and you can complete the survey. I'm going to put the timer for 2 minutes right now, so please give us feedback and tell us how you're doing with each of our pillars, like your faith habits, your financial habits, your health, and your personal growth habits. So I'm starting the timer now. So to repeat how to access the survey, Allison Grace dropped a link into the chat box, and you can actually click on that link, or you can hold your cell phone up and use your camera. And there's a QR code, this little box here that you see on the presentation. And if you click, like mine just shows, and I click where that link is, and it pulls up the survey automatically. And the very last thing I want to share with you is next month, we are going to be highlighting our health and wellness pillar. We have a wonderful speaker next month who happens to be Barbara Carnahan. She's our Director of Health and Wellness, and she's going to have some guest speakers with her as well. And if you really want to improve your health and wellness, I encourage you to absolutely join next month. Allison Grace dropped the link to next month's webinar so you could register to attend. Or you can scan again the box that's on the screen using your camera, and you can register that way so that you will get the information to join that webinar. And really, we just want to tell you all, thank you so much for joining today. If you have any questions about anything that we covered, you can drop your question into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I can try to request that you take yourself off of mute. So however you would like to do it. I will also send a link to the survey after this because I'm going to share some resources that we have with you. So if you don't have any questions, we just want to make sure that we ended at 12:26 today. I'll stop the recording now. And we just really appreciate you all for being here and taking the time to hear from these 3 wonderful speakers. Thank you, Paul, Chrissy, and Holly. We really appreciate you so much. And y'all all have a fantastic day. And again, I will send the survey and some resources that we're going to share so you can start tracking your habits now.